In our own time, we've seen brave men overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable and forces that seemed overwhelming. Men with courage and vision can still determine their own destiny. They can choose slavery or freedom, war or peace. I have no doubt which they will choose. The treaty we are signing here today is evidence of the path they will follow. If there is anything certain today, if there is anything inevitable in the future, it is the will of the people of the world for freedom and for peace.
NATO just got larger. Tonight, there are 3 new members, all of whom used to be on the other side. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright welcomed NATO's newest members in Independence, Missouri, the birthplace of Harry Truman, who was president when NATO was founded. The Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary were part of the powerful Soviet-led military alliance, the Warsaw Pact. But that became history when the Cold War ended, along with the old Soviet Union. And today, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic became the newest members of NATO.
The NBC Nightly News report on Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic joining NATO 50 years after the treaty to ensure European security was first signed by President Harry Truman.
How amazing is Madeleine Albright?
I love her. She's so strong, and her career, it's incredible, the impact she's had on the world. That effort and foresight to establish the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is something Joe writes about in his new book entitled Saving Freedom, Truman, the Cold War, and the Fight for Western Civilization. It's coming out this Tuesday, but you can pre-order it now. And joining us now this morning to discuss the book, we have former U.S. ambassador to NATO and former State Department spokesman Nicholas Burns. He is a professor of diplomacy and international relations at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Also with us, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of The Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Joe, after reading your book, I was struck by how often Harry Truman was underestimated by his peers, mocked by elites, and he proved them all wrong time and time again. It kind of reminds me of another Democrat who gets sworn in as president on January 20th.
Well, that's true. I mean, you can look at Joe Biden again. I think there are so many similarities between Joe Biden and Harry Truman. One of those similarities is they were underestimated for large chunks of their career. Harry Truman spent a career being underestimated and attacked by his Republican opponents and also by media elites. And for Truman, the attacks were harsh and unceasing. A prominent journalist and historian said that Truman was a, quote, strange little man when he arrived in Washington. At the same time, the New York Times dismissed him as a rube. When Franklin Roosevelt's team were considering vice presidents to replace Henry Wallace in 1944, they were going around the room. They were exhausted. Truman's name finally came up, and FDR's chief of staff gruffly asked, "Who the hell is Harry Truman?" After the pick, Time said that FDR's selection was a, quote, mousy little man from Missouri, and others mocked the selection as the second Missouri Compromise. What I found so remarkable researching Harry Truman and just reading about Truman throughout my entire life is even after he reached the White House, Republicans and Democrats still mocked him. They adopted the phrase to err is Truman. And even when he was running for president in 1948 under the Democratic banner, Democrats sort of adopted this dark humor about their supposedly doomed candidate, and they would hold up signs that was a takeoff of a popular song at the time. It was said, "I'm just mild about Harry." But the unkindest cut of all came from Truman's own mother-in-law, who let him know when he was younger that he was not good enough to marry her daughter, Bess. And Gene Robinson, you talk about getting no respect, being the Rodney Dangerfield of American politics, even when he was in the White House, where he let his mother-in-law live. She still let him know that compared to FDR, he was a disappointment. But it's pretty remarkable about Truman. To his credit, he kept his head down. He always kept campaigning. He kept governing. And at the end of his life, he left the White House with a 22% approval rating. But in the judgment of Winston Churchill, he was the man who, quote, did more than any other person to save Western civilization. I would take Winston Churchill's praise over everybody else's rebukes any day of the week on that topic.
Yeah, I think I would too. And, you know, the thing about Harry Truman is, and you bring it out in the book, and congratulations, by the way, on the book,
Thank
which
you
I
so
really
much,
enjoyed. But you know, he knew who he was. Not everybody else didn't necessarily know who he was, but he knew what he was, and he was. I mean, talk about a gutsy guy. You know, it was Harry Truman who, for example, desegregated the armed forces.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.